Hello and welcome to One-on-One. I'm Vernon and I'm pleased to welcome back today Hanif Benjamin, clinical therapist and trauma specialist with the Center for Human Development Limited. Welcome back to the program.
Thank you so much for having me again.
Thank you for being here because, I mean, the field you work in is such an interesting field and I think so important in our national development and quite often overlooked. So I'm always happy to have you on and I'm glad you took the time to come.
Thank you so much.
There's two major events coming up that you're involved in. One is mental health in Trinidad and Tobago, overcoming the stigma, which I think is tremendously important.
Indeed.
And that's on the 16th of this month. And then following that, you have another session on
trauma workshop, yes.
A workshop for children and adolescents.
Correct.
Let's deal with the first one. First of all, why did you feel necessary to have this particular meeting at this time?
I think it is the opportune time, as you rightly said, Vernon. It is needed. We are a traumatized society. We are a society hurting. We are losing the battle against the fight for our children. And I am saying that if we look at the sum total of all of this, it goes back to one thing: mental illness. Whether it is understanding mental illness and or getting help for it. Every day I'm getting calls. Up driving here, I was getting a call. I got a call dealing with a person who is dealing with a brother who is seemingly bipolar, and they just don't know what to do, how to do it. So we need to begin this conversation. We need to have the conversation in a real way so people can start to get real help.
Now, of course, I mean, the key word to me in that whole thing is the stigma, which I think is holding us back as a society from dealing with genuine issues that have to be dealt with. I mean, today you'll hear people talking about the St. Anne's as the madhouse, for example, which again is a stigma you're placing on a place that does very good and important work. Why do we have this very sort of, I hate to use the word backward, but I'm going to use it, approach to mental health in our country?
The first thing is, strangely you should mention St. Anne's, because we have the CEO of St. Anne's on our panel, because again, and she will be dealing with Dr. Otello, dealing with mental health and the institution, again, so that she can highlight to people that St. Anne's is not a madhouse. Our mental facility within the hospitals are not madhouse. You know, you always hear the Ward 1, but it's a place that can treat people, that can give people much needed relief for mental illness.
Another psychologist told me there's no such diagnosis as mad.
I have never learned that in all my studies, right? We have mentally ill people, and we look the madman and the mad this one, and you know, and changing our language also will help us to overcome the stigma. You see, a lot of people fear what they don't know, Vernon. It is the human nature. We fear the unknown. So we need to make it known. And that is why we're having this. We're having this because in every one of our families, there is a member of our family who is living with or dealing with some form of mental illness. And it may not be walking on the streets being socially displaced mental illness, but it can be simple depression, anxiety, you know, anger, all of these different things that encompass mental illness. You could be living with that. You see, people keep thinking that mental illness is the man who walks the street. But I'm saying mental illness is beyond that. And again, that is not allowing us to help our children in a real way. So you have children going through the entire school population until they get to Form 4 or 5, if they get there, with serious mental illness. And because of the stigma, we are not willing to deal with it. And when you talk about adults, you know, you have an employee who is a model employee, and all of a sudden, this employee is behaving in ways that is not, you know, normal according to society. And we don't understand that that employee might also be going through some difficulty and not able to understand it. Right? So this entire workshop, this one-day conference on June 16th is really geared towards opening up the discussion. And we have a powerful panel who will help us to go through every different area of society.
How do we have any kind of grasp on how widespread mental illnesses in Trinidad and Tobago?
I don't
because
think-
of the various forms, it may be hard to sort of
Right,
get an exact
and
number.
various level as well.
Right.
I think what we're able to measure, and again, this could be a good question for Dr. Otello, in terms of the amount of people who utilize the mental health institutions in Trinidad and Tobago. And I think we need to multiply that by probably 100 in terms of people who are not being treated. One, because they don't know where to go, and two, they are too ashamed to go, right? So to get a real figure in terms of mental illness, I don't think that we have that. But I think that the amount of people utilizing our facilities can be a good indicator to start. But when we get into our families, and when we get into the neighborhood, the communities, we all see it. We all know the people who are suffering. We all know the people who are dealing with dark depression, clinical depression, anxiety, who can no longer live a normal life because of some form of illness. People go through trauma. And because of trauma, they now live a certain lifestyle that they never used to live before. All these are forms of mental illness that we need to help people to get over.
And it really does undermine our society, doesn't it? Because as you mentioned, if you've got somebody with a mental illness, a serious mental illness within a family, they could be a parent, could be a child, that affects the entire family unit, doesn't it?
Correct. And I say to people, and I'll use this as an example, the breadwinner of your family has been diagnosed with a terminal illness. It affects everyone. A member of your family loses a leg or something in an accident. It affects everyone. So too is mental illness. It affects everyone. And the call that I got coming here is that the young lady saying to me, I don't know what to do. She's financially strapped. She is emotionally strapped. She's not there for her children and her family because she has to see after her loved one who has mental illness. She has no formal training and she has no support. So you're talking about an entire family network in shambles because of mental illness. And most family, if not all, have someone who is represented by this. And they don't know who to call. I'm saying, why are we making mental health a secret? It's time that we open up mental health to society where if your foot is hurting, you could just call up a doctor and say, listen, my podiatrist, I need to get this done. So too must you be able to pick up the phone and get help for mental illness.
But again, the stigma is what keeps us back from that, isn't it? I mean, not just for the person involved may be aware of stigma, but families and others around us perhaps involuntarily push that stigma on us.
And I think the stigma
Or like we get snap out of it, or try and fix yourself up,
right,
or cheer up.
Cheer up, or he dead already, and you have these comments which is not helpful in by any means of, So again, this dialogue, this conversation is to help people to understand how can you support people with mental illness? How can you help them along the journey? Because I'll tell you, in my work in the United States, when I worked at a residential facility, I saw two types of people. One mental illness, yet one population is able to move on to a different level. And those are the ones that family comes every weekend and visit and take them to shop and have dinners. And the people who have no one to look after them, they are the ones who will remain in facility, rehabilitated by their illness. You see, and it's the same modality here. If we don't have a support system or social environment to help, then that person is going to go further and further into mental illness and get into a darker place where it becomes even more difficult to help them. You see? So we need to begin the conversation, and we're having sixth formers. We are inviting sixth formers to come because we want to begin the conversation early. Right? We are inviting all forms of people, all forms of society, come on down, because we want this conversation to be widespread. We need to break the stigma. We need to stop calling people madman. We need to stop telling that we go into the crack house or to the mad house.
Or she's a little off, for example.
Or she's a little off, or she's a little slow, or retarded. And those are a designation that we need to put away. And I think if we begin by using the correct terminologies and helping, and you saying no, he's not retarded, he's dealing with some developmental disability or mental illness, then we are going to be on the right track. And again, that is why we want to have a dialogue. That is what it is, a dialogue on mental illness.
I think it's wonderful that you're inviting sixth formers to attend because, I mean, quite often, to a certain extent, they pick up on the same attitudes their parents have, I mean, young people in general. And therefore, we perpetuate the cycle of misnaming things and misdealing with mental illness. So by getting young people more aware of proper terminology and ways of handling things, you're sort of paving the way for the future, aren't you?
Of course, of course. And one of the greatest thing that I'm seeing now is everybody's, oh, he bipolar, or she's bipolar, or she's schizophrenic. And I'm saying even our young people are now getting into this type of terminologies and without
Even if they're
understanding.
using it cruelly, yeah.
Yes, and not understanding what this really means. You see, so by inviting them, we're hoping that, and then again, they will go on to study, you know, in various fields, and whether psychology, social work, and or the human services. So they will be able to go in there with a set mind frame that we will not discriminate, we will not condone the stigma, we will help our brothers and sisters. So that is why we want to start the conversation early, right? So we're going to have the sixth formers, we are inviting all the different ministries, people who are going out there in the field, all the communities, you know, teachers, everyone religious, to come out and have this conversation. Because the way we design the panel, it deals with, and I'll just call them out for you real quick. We have Reverend Clyde Harvey, right?
Who I had on quite recently, very excellent.
I saw it, yes, it was powerful. He will be dealing with mental health and spirituality. Again, because of our culture, a lot of times you talk about, you know, somebody did something, whether it's obeah or witchcraft or whatever, and not understanding that is just mental illness. So we want to have a real conversation on mental health and spirituality. We're going to have Mr. Justice Ivor Archie on the panel, and he will be addressing mental health and the legal fraternity, because quite often people who are living with mental health go before the courts. How do we manage that? How do we manage them going to our prisons, not being treated, and then coming back into society, and as if we want some different person to come back out? Right? We're going to have Dr. Hazel Otello, who is from St. Anne's, who is going to be dealing with mental health and the institutions, helping people to understand that institution is not your enemy, right? It is your friend, and it can work. Professor Jared Hutchinson, he will be dealing with mental health and medication, another great taboo. People think that medication for mental illness is some kind of mad pill. You know, you have high blood pressure, you take your medication, not so, and you don't think about it, and you keep moving on. Yet we have this discrimination or this stigma for medication. We're going to have Mr. Hal Graves, who everybody knows as someone in the community. So he has been dealing and seeing and living mental health in the communities. So he will be addressing mental health and the community. And we have Dr. Jonathan Vince from Tobago Psychiatry. He will also be dealing with mental health and psychiatry. And I think the amalgamation...
That's a really high-powered panel.
Yeah, and that is why when we were forming this, we say, you know what, we want to have people who represent different factors of society, because very rarely they all amalgamate. Very rarely we sit and they all speak about the same thing, yet it is spoken in their own little corners, in their own little world. And it's time for us to amalgamate these conversations into a national conversation, you see, so that everyone can get the same information at the same time.
Rather than having it trapped in spheres in different areas.
Oh yeah.
As you touched there on Father Harvey talking about the influence of spirituality, it's interesting you mentioned that, because I think to a large extent, I'm sure it's not intentional on their part, but you'll see a lot of these more sort of charismatic style churches, many of them on television, for example, will be casting out the evil spirits of a mental problem. That's really demonizing, literally.
You know, and
a problem.
In the psychology world, there is a great divide, and some biblical scholars will tell you that psychologists and clinicians are not looked upon in a good light in the biblical term, right? And this has been a debate that has been going on since God knows when. And the conversation has always been that there is some force that controls you, therefore we cast out the demons, you see? And while I respect that there is a spiritual side, and yes, there is good and evil, you know, and you could debate that, but, you know, personally I believe that there is good and evil. And however, there comes a time when, and in my studies, we must understand that there are also things that happen in the body, that happens in the mind, in the brain, with our chemical composition, our lack of, or too much of. You see, and we have to account for that. I think, and that is why I put, and I requested to have a spiritual side, because I want the debate. You see, because we need to have the
You're not running
conversation.
away from it.
Oh, no, we need to confront it.
Because, I mean, as science has developed, there's certain things that we don't blame on supernatural forces anymore. I mean, even if the religion may in the past have dealt with them because that was all we knew how to do. For example, if somebody has leprosy or Hansen's disease, we don't assume that's evil spirits causing it anymore. We know how to treat that. And if somebody walks in with somebody is missing a leg, you don't say, well, we'll bring it back.
Right.
By praying for it.
Because we understand that that is what it is.
Yeah.
Right? So I think that spirituality has its place, and a much needed place. And mental health treatment also has its place, a much needed place. So we need to come together and find a medium. And that is why when I asked the team to come together, I wanted to bring it, not that I want to be confrontational in the event, but I want to inculcate powerful discussion. I want to inculcate real discussion. I want people to come to this event and ask tough questions, because too long, Vernon, we have been hiding. We have been hiding behind the cloak of spirituality, behind the cloak of him mad, behind the cloak of I don't know. And the time is now when we say, you know what? Let's confront it and let's begin the conversation.
Do you think one of the problems is the fact that despite the fact that psychology and psychiatry have come such a long way over the years, over the last decades even, that we understand the brain better, for example, we understand the mechanisms that lead to certain things, people still recognize to a certain extent that psychology is still an inexact science, isn't it? You're dealing with complex individuals who may have complex problems, and therefore it isn't always easy to deal with them.
Correct. And that is why I tell people I don't fix people. A lot of people come to my office and say, well, something wrong with him, fix him. You know, or my marriage is broken, fix it. Or my child is behaving this way, fix him or her. And I tell people, I am not a mechanic, right? This is not a surgery, right? What I can do is I could look at your symptoms and your symptomatology, and I could help you to identify some of the deficits. And in identifying some of the deficits, we can then come up with a plan. Right? I tell people it is not an exact science, because we are dealing with the human mind. We are dealing with the human being. And I tell people, for example, when you're suffering from high blood pressure, what we call high blood pressure, but we know it's hyperglycemia and all that, and you go into these comas and or you get an attack, that can very well look like a manic episode that is happening from someone who is fully mentally ill. Right? People don't know this, but if you contracted syphilis, which is a sexually transmitted disease,
with a very long lifespan.
Right, very long, and it goes untreated, do you know that in your latter years, you can develop Alzheimer-type behavior as well as schizophrenic-type behaviors? So there is a correlation. It's proven. It's I'm not making it. It's there.
The physiology is known.
Right,
yeah.
it is what it is. Right? Do you know that if you are on drugs, certain types of drugs, and you're taking it over a period of time, that can also bring on psychosis and different types of mental illness? So everything has its place and its time, and we need to put everything in its context and have the conversation in that context, right, as opposed to fighting one another, because we realize that we're not going anywhere fast, right?
We have about 8 minutes left. I want to ask, do you think you have time to do a second part of this? Because we haven't even dealt with the adolescents.
Yes, yeah.
Well, let's stick with this then for the time being. In terms of the average person knowing whether they need to see a psychiatrist or a psychologist if they have a problem, what is the best way of dealing with that decision?
I think, and the way the Center for Human Development does it is that we don't do psychological or psychiatric assessment until and unless you have done a full clinical assessment. A clinical assessment for us is one-on-one. You come in, we look at you, we talk to you, we get a full history, we speak to your family, whoever your supporting circle might be, and we get a full history as to what's going on. Then we're going to perform some basic tests in that clinical assessment. And only then we will determine whether or not two things happen, or three things rather. you go on to do a psychological, and the psychological will really help us to determine some of your access to diagnosis. When I say access to, I'm referring to your thing like your personality disorders. And or depending on what's going on, we could then make recommendation for you to see a psychiatrist. And most times psychiatrists deals with medication, right? They are the only ones who can prescribe medication for someone who is living with mental illness. And again, are we talking about sometime you might need something to help you with your anxiety, anti-anxiety medication, right? Sometime you...
Because even with depression, which I guess is
Of
probably the
course.
widest form of mental illness, the fact that sometimes there's situational depression and then there's clinical depression.
Correct.
And depending on which one it is, a psychologist could help more, or a psychiatrist might
Right.
be able to prescribe something that can adjust your serotonin levels or whatever it is.
Correct. But we are great advocates of two must meet. In Trinidad
So
and
there is a
Tobago,
nexus then?
yes, in Trinidad and Tobago, unfortunately, we have a lot of situations where you go and you get medication and that's it. We don't believe that medication can work by itself. Because the premise here is that you're going to go on medication and you're going to receive therapy, right? And while you are learning coping mechanism and you are learning to develop yourself, medication should decrease. But people are on medication and they're just on medication and that's it. And that is where it becomes dangerous.
Especially because of some medication, they actually can have the opposite effect.
Correct.
And if you're depressed, they
Correct.
can make you more depressed, and they're discovering this more and
Right.
more recently.
Or if you put you on a medication that takes you out of the depression and you're suicidal, then you're more apt to commit suicide. So I always believe that while a person is on medication, they should, well, at least in the Center for Human Development, you will not be on medication without having therapy and medication management to go along with that. Because one, they must work in tandem together to get the best result. So again, they both have its purpose, right? And so you have the therapies going on one end, then you have the medication on one end. And I think that both people, and we're doing it, we're talking to our doctors, must communicate. Right, because if I'm seeing you every 3 months for medication and I'm seeing you every week, I will have more information to pass on to the psychiatrist who can then inform whether or not this medication is actually working.
It seems to me that there's also a need, I think, for just GPs to be more familiar, because I know many times people will go in and say, Doc, because that's their first entrance into the world of medicine there, I'm feeling a bit down, or I'm feeling like killing myself or something like that, and the doctor will write off, and here's a prescription for Prozac or Zoloft or something like that.
Dangerous.
Right, and that happens quite often, doesn't it?
Yes, and
Rather than saying, listen, let's send you to somebody who may be able to diagnose this better.
I'm not sure what is the procedure in terms of doctors becoming doctors, but I do agree that more needs to be done with the GP, the family doctors, right? Because I've dealt with clients who have been living with depression for years, and they would go to the doctor and complain about their back, their foot, their hand, and they will do millions of dollars in scans and tests, and nothing is showing up that is physical. But everything is physiological, which is the feeling of something physical, but yet it is psychological in nature. Right? So your GP being that first line of defense for you should be able to recognize that, say, maybe you need to talk to Hanif. You know, maybe you need to talk to a psychologist. Maybe let me just write a referral to just check out this person. But I don't think that is being done enough. So a lot of people are stressed out, their anxiety, depression, and those are some of the common ones that we deal with on a daily basis.
It can sort of feed into itself, can't it? If you realize that you're getting worse or you're not improving in any way, despite the fact that you're taking medication even, it sort of spirals out of control at a certain point.
Of course, because I don't agree that medication should be by itself. And medication...
Well, I can vouch for you on this one, because I've had to deal with depression in my own life. Many years ago, I was feeling very, very awful with it, and I was prescribed medication. It made it worse. And eventually I took it on myself to see a psychologist, and after a couple of months, 3 months, I was able to develop the coping mechanisms much more effectively than that medication ever did.
That is, and I think, Vernon, your example, and thank you so much for sharing that, it puts it in perspective. And we at the Center for Human Development believes that it cannot be medication alone, especially medication without support. Right, because then your family don't know about the medication, you don't know about the medication, and so if you go to a therapist, I would prefer to teach you coping mechanism to help you to find out why you're depressed. And we could use medication to help with the things I can't help it, which would be a serotonin and all those other chemical imbalances. But I can utilize our therapy session to give you that level of coping mechanism for you to start to see things differently. And when you have that and you have the medication, what you have is a better functioning person. I tell people, when you look at organization, look at your sick leaves. How much sick leave people take a year? That is a conversation we're not having, because we're taking a mental health day.
But in fact, those mental health days may actually be genuine mental health
It is,
days
because
people have reached the limit.
Correct.
Yeah.
But we are not treating it appropriately. And again,
Or adjusting the work environment so that
to
people
do
have
it.
stress relief to some
Right.
extent.
And again, that is why I keep going back. I felt it was needed and timely to have this dialogue on mental health, because it you know.
Well, we're out of time for this particular part of the interview. We're going to continue, as I mentioned. But if you can remind people for this discussion of mental health in Trinidad and Tobago, overcoming the stigma, this is on the 16th?
Right. This is on June 16, Monday, June 16, 7:45 is registration, and we go up until 3 p.m. at the Amphitheater A at Eric William Medical Sciences Complex.
Now, if people want more information or to register,
Please, www.livelifewelltt.org. livelifewelltt.org. All the information is up there, including the registration form.
that's a great URL, by the way.
Yeah, I love it.
Well, Hanif, it's been a pleasure, and we're going to continue this conversation shortly, but thank you so much
Thank you. Thank
for
you for
being here.
having me.
Thank you. You've been watching One on One. Join us again tomorrow for another edition.